Welcome to Crosstalk. Is your heart feeling like this today? Are you feeling fearful, anxious? Well, this program is for you. Welcome to Crosstalk. We continue in our series of God's names. You know how He started to reveal who He was, how He started training the minds of His people to know that, well, He was who He said He was, and He would do what He said He would do. Now, I'm holding a fork because I want to remind you of a story I told you some time ago. Now, this story that I told you in the past had to do with a lady that had a terminal disease. And she knew she was dying. And she called the pastor in, and she said, I need to talk about my memorial service. I would like to plan my own memorial service. And the pastor said, okay. And these are very important times for pastors when we get to actually plan the memorial service with the person that is dying. And she said, well, I would like my sister to do my biography, and I would like my brother to sing this song, and all this stuff. She had it all planned. And then she said, I want to make sure that when I'm laying down in the casket, I have a fork in my hand. And this was the most unusual request that the pastor had ever heard. A fork in your hand? Why in the world would you want a fork in your hand? And she said, well, let me tell you why. Because everybody's going to ask you about that. And you're going to tell them this. When I used to be at church, and we used to have a lunch or a potluck, we call it, where everybody brings food in. And after I was done eating the main course, she said, somebody would come and take my plate and say, keep your fork. I knew, she said, that the best was still to come because dessert was coming. And I just love that story because sometimes I wonder, what would it take to live and die with such peace in your heart? You know, I showed you this heart when we started, and I said, is your heart feeling like this, fragmented, anxious, fearful? Well, today we're going to talk about something that God revealed, that this person decided to call God peace. So let's start. Now we have left for a while the Exodus, and we are now going to the book of Judges. Now, Judges is a whole different period after they get to the promised land. The people of Israel get there. Don't forget that we are following the redemption history as a big unit where God is revealing who He is. And part of the I guess His visual aids, the way He's teaching them, is through the names that either He gives them or they call Him when they realize something new about God. And the book of Judges is a very interesting book. It's actually very different than all the other books because we don't have any Moses anymore. We don't have Joshua, but we have judges. And the judges are actually people that God places to help guide the people of Israel, to help understand the law, how to live lives that are healthy, and to lead them into battle when it's necessary. And the Spirit of the Lord comes upon them and gives them the ability to do something. Probably we could say that there are 4 major judges: Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah, and Samson. Those are the 4 main judges per se. And of course, after that, Samuel will come and be the prophet, and then he would anoint David as a king eventually after Saul. So this is a period that has what we call a pattern. And the pattern is this. Let me read it to you. Chapter 5 of Judges, verse 31. So let's start there. It says here, the land was undisturbed undisturbed for 40 years, and then the sons of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. You're going to read this sentence so many times in Judges. First, there is a time of peace. Then they forget about God. Then they do evil. Then when they do evil, the oppressors come. And when the oppressors come, they remember God. And then they say, oh, Lord, are you going to deliver us? And then the Lord delivers them. And then there is a period of peace. And then they forget the Lord, and we start all over again. So think of a circle that keeps reinforcing itself. And this is the pattern of Judges. Now, one of these times has come upon them. They do evil in the sight of the Lord, and they are under oppression. So why don't we take it from there? And you know what? Israel's heart is exactly like this. They don't have peace with God. They are without peace in their land. They are anxious. They are fearful. So much so that when we start the story of Gideon, this is exactly where we find him. We find him in the middle of a place that we're not supposed to find him. We find him actually in a place of distress. We find him not in his house. I mean, these people are living in caves and in the mountains because the oppressors that have come upon them don't even let them live normal lives. So why don't we take it from there? Judges chapter 6, and we start on verse 2. Now, verse 2 says, the power of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of Midian, the sons of Israel made for themselves dens, which were in the mountains. They were not living at home. I mean, if you thought you had a problem today, think about them. They couldn't even live at home. This was like the worst tsunami and the worst earthquake ever. They had to leave their land, and they made caves and dens in the mountains so that these oppressors wouldn't see them. And the dens were in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. It was when Israel had sown that the Midianites would come up with the Amalekites and the sons of the east. Remember the Amalekites? That was the first fight of Israel in the Exodus. They would camp against them and destroy the produce of the earth as far as Gaza and leave no sustenance in Israel. I mean, how would you live your life if everything you try to do doesn't work out? I mean, I understand some of you are exactly in that place where you feel that no matter how hard I work, how much I try to talk to my husband, how much I talk to my children, nothing is working. My heart is fearful and anxious and broken. Well, that's exactly how Israel was. And God is starting to reveal something else to them. Aside from being Yahweh Rophe that we already talked about, the Lord is our healer. And aside from being Yahweh Nissi, the Lord is my banner, Gideon is going to find out something about this God of Israel. So let's take it from when Gideon gets to see the angel. Okay, so let's go there. Chapter 6 of Judges, verse 11. The angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash. And his son Gideon, look what Gideon is doing. This is kind of funny, because look what Gideon is doing. He was beating out wheat in the wine press in order to save it from the Midianites. I mean, you don't beat wheat in a wine press. You do that in the threshing floor. See, the threshing floor is a large area where you put all the wheat and you beat the wheat to try to get the grains out. But these people, the Midianites, were oppressing them in such a manner that he got into a little wine press. I mean, this was a much smaller area where you're supposed to make the wine either with your feet or some other way where you put the grapes and make the wine. He is in that little place, in that little hole, beating wheat because he cannot go out in the open to get the wheat because they're going to see him. So it says here that he's in the wine press beating wheat to save it from the Midianites. And don't forget, Gideon is like the rest of Israel with a broken, fearful, destroyed, and depressed heart. The angel of the Lord, verse 12, appeared to him and said to him, Yahweh, the Lord, is with you, mighty warrior. Have you ever been called something you're absolutely not? Have you ever been called, you mighty, I don't know, happy person, and you have this sad face at that moment? Have you ever been called what you're not? Well, this is what happens to Gideon. You valiant, mighty warrior. And Gideon looks back and he says, who are you talking to? Me? Because I'm not valiant, I'm not mighty, and I'm not a warrior. And the angel calls him by this name. And Gideon said to him, if in fact he was this mighty warrior, you would think he would say, yes, I am, and I'm ready to go, and I'm going to fight the Midianites. But that's not what Gideon says. Verse 13, Gideon said to him, oh, my Lord, if Yahweh is with us, if what you're saying is true, how come, have you ever asked God, how come, why? He says, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? What a perfect question. Wouldn't you want to ask the Lord this every once in a while? If Yahweh is with us, don't forget, God is revealing who he is to his people little by little. And he says, well, if Yahweh is with us, how come this has happened to us? If in fact he is with me, why is this happening to me? Why is my marriage falling apart? Why are my children in the wrong way? Why don't I have a job? Why don't I have enough money? If the Lord is really with me, how come this is happening to me? And you can see Gideon kind of, And so here he continues, where are all his miracles, which our fathers told us about? All these mighty things he used to do when Yahweh brought us up from Egypt. It looks like we have a different God now, says Gideon. How come? Now the Lord has abandoned us and given us in the hand of Midian. Oh man, have you ever felt like you have nowhere else to go than your two hands, because if you look up, you are just distraught? Have you ever been like this a whole day saying, how could God do this to me? This is where Gideon is. And so here, I love this verse 14. The Lord looks at him almost like saying, oh, Gideon. And this is what he says. Go in this your strength. What strength? I don't have any strength. I don't have anything left. Well, this is your strength. I have sent you. You will deliver Israel. And again, Gideon looks back and says, who? Me? No, you have the wrong person. I am the one with the broken heart. I have no strength, no power. And on top of that, says Gideon, verse 15, he said to him, Lord, how shall I deliver Israel? You must have the wrong person. Behold, my family is the least in Manasseh. That was his tribe. And I am the youngest in my father's house. Okay, Lord, I think you got the wrong thing, says Gideon. Actually, I am not the person you're looking for. Actually, I belong to the smallest family. And on top of that, I am the youngest. So, no, I can't go. And the Lord decides that he's going to teach Gideon who he is. And so he starts revealing to him through what happens next that he is not an ordinary person, that this is not just an angel that has shown up, that this is a supernatural being that will give him what he needs. After the angel burns the food that Gideon prepares for him, Gideon realizes he's in the presence of God. He's in the presence of Yahweh. And when, verse 22, when Gideon saw that he was the angel of Yahweh, he said, oh, Lord God, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. And so he's afraid. He thinks he's going to die. And the Lord said to him, peace, peace, Gideon, peace be with you. I'm going to give you peace. Do not fear. These are your two choices, fear or peace. I am offering you peace, says the angel of the Lord. You shall not die. And Gideon built an altar in that place to the Lord and gave a name to the altar. And this is our title for today. Yahweh shalom. The Lord is peace. Now, I have chosen to bring two visualizations. One, we're going to call it peace, that is right here. And the other one, we will call it fear. And the whole story of Gideon will be his struggle between these two ways of life, between anxiety and fear and peace. He's always struggling. And the Lord says, peace. Don't be afraid. Trump your fear with the peace that I give you. And actually Gideon says, okay, I'm going to build an altar, and the altar is going to be called Yahweh Shalom. The Lord is peace. I'm going to choose that. You know, shalom in Hebrew is much bigger than the word peace, much more complete than the word peace in English. See, when we say peace in English, we think of no strife or no problems or something like that. Shalom in Hebrew is a wholeness. That's why I chose a red heart. A wholeness, a completeness is when you are at peace in every possible sense of the word. Mental, heart, anxiety, nothing. You're just living your life not because there's no difficulties, but because your inner self is at peace. And so God says, look, I'm going to give you peace. And Gideon says, okay, fine. Yahweh Shalom. And then you know what he does? He tears down all the altars of Baal. Because you see, in the setting of sacrifice, Shalom means to be reconciled with God. So every time somebody says that through Jesus Christ and the cross we are at peace with God, is because in this sacrificial context, being at peace means you are reconciled with God. So you're at peace in your heart and in your mind. You're just at peace with God. So Gideon says, okay, I'm going to put the altar, and says it's going to be called Yahweh Shalom. And he goes and tears down all the altars that were for Baal. But look, I mean, you have to kind of smile at what it says in verse 27. Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had spoken to him. Because he was too afraid of his father's household, he did it at night. You know, I mean, you have to feel for Gideon. You know, yes, Lord. Yahweh Shalom. The Lord will be my peace from now on. I'm at peace with God. God has called me. Whatever it is. And then he goes and tears all the altars at night because he's afraid. Are you like this? Saying, oh man, I want to believe so much that the Lord is my peace, but I'm so fearful. You know, don't forget that the peace of God passes understanding. Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in all things, with prayer and petition and thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God that passes understanding. I love that. It means that this is your understanding of a situation. Well, the peace of God passes your understanding. So this is your understanding. He passes the understanding. He gives you peace that is greater than your understanding. Will focus your heart and your minds in Jesus Christ, which means that your feelings in your hearts and your mind will be focused on Jesus Christ, so that in the middle of all the problems, you can be at peace. Shalom. And so he starts in his calling, and this is a beautiful story. So, and if you have never actually ever seen it before, go and read it. And if you have seen it and read it, go in detail, because here is where this fearful man with a broken heart goes to do what the Lord told him to do. And it says in verse 34 that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him to enable him to do this. Now, he's so afraid that he's going to ask for a sign. Now, this is the sign. He's going to put this fleece. A lot of people forget. Actually, they don't see where the fleece is. We focus so much on the fleece. See, he had this fleece, and he says, okay, Lord, I'm going to put this fleece. And he does it twice because he's so confused. He says, okay, well, it has to be wet and everything else around it dry, and then I'll know that you're really calling me. But then he realizes that the wool probably would have done that anyway. So he says, okay, let's do it backwards. Then may this be dry and everything else wet. But see, what we usually miss is that he's doing it in a place that already is forecasting victory. Because look where he does it. He's no longer in the winepress where he puts the fleece. Chapter 6 of Judges, verse 37 says, behold, I will put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. So for the first time, we have Gideon no longer in the winepress, but now in the open field where he was supposed to be beating the wheat to start with at the beginning of the story, which he was not because he was afraid. Now it's a sign of faith that he's bringing this fleece to the threshing floor, to where everybody can see him, to where the oppressors can get to him. And he asked for a sign in the very place that he's hoping to spend the rest of his years in, because now he will have no more oppressors. Well, you know the story. The story is actually a wonderful story, because this man who is struggling so much, how is it that we live with a fork in our hands? How can we live our lives saying, I know the best is still to come. I know God has done something for me that I could never do for myself. How do you live and die with a fork in your hand? So here's Gideon saying, okay, how do I do this? So we have an army of 135,000 people, and Gideon can actually put together 32,000 people. It's like, okay, this is not good. I have a quarter of the numbers that they have, so I actually can't do this. Well, but maybe if we're really skilled and very good, we can do it. The Lord says no, because if you do it with 32,000, you're going to think you did it. And there's no boasting in the history of redemption. And that's what God is teaching everybody. First to Abraham, then to Moses, and now to Gideon, one of the judges. So he says, you guys are too many. And let me tell you something that is kind of funny. Let me tell you where they were camped. Chapter 7, verse 1. Gideon and all the people who were with him rose early and camped beside the spring of Harod. Now, the spring of Harod is a play on a word from the Hebrew that means trembling. So they're camped in the place of trembling. I mean, that really tells you how they're feeling, doesn't it? So they're trembling. They're camped in trembling camp. But what is kind of funny is that the other people are camped in the hill of Moreh, which means fearful. So we have two armies. One is camping in the place of trembling, and the other camp is in the place of fearful. I mean, we're not doing really good, are we? And God says, okay, whoever is afraid and trembling, it's very funny because it's using very similar words to the two camps. Verse 3, whoever is afraid or trembling, go home. And of the 32,000 people, 22,000 go home. We are all very fearful people because we can't, really. The difficulties are so big sometimes. But God says, no, look, I am the one that gives you the strength, so I don't want you to boast. Maybe because the fleece got wet and then it got dry. You must know that I'm the one that's doing this miraculously. So trump your fear with the peace that I want to give you. Trump it. Put it on top. This is bigger than this. Not because there's no reasons to fear. It's because the peace of God passes. Is greater than your fears. And so 22,000 go home and 10,000 remain. And Gideon says, yeah, okay. 10,000 doesn't work out, but I'll spread them. No, says God, we have too many still. You're still going to think you did it. You're still going to think you have enough strength. And Gideon's going, no, I don't think so. I'm very fearful. God says, well, I need you to run out of options so that when it happens, you know that it's me. So you know what happens? He's left with 300 men. And with 300 men is that Gideon will learn really that Yahweh Shalom, that the Lord brings peace, because he has the power to do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. This is a fantastic story of deliverance where God delivered that day in Midian. Actually, let me read you the conclusion. Judges chapter 7, verse 22. They blew 300 trumpets, and the Lord set the sword. Yahweh set the sword of one against another in the whole army, and the army fled. See, the battle is always the Lord's. Our part is shalom. His part is to fight on our behalf. Our part is the consequence that we can have shalom. See, I always bring Isaiah 53 because when we get to this time of the prophets are starting to understand some of this, even though they're still struggling. And Isaiah 53, once again, in verse 5, will say, the punishment of our peace was upon him. He is our peace. Of course, you know that the Apostle Paul will keep telling you peace is a person. See, peace is not the absence of trouble. It is the presence of Christ. Peace is not that you have no difficulties. Peace is a person because Christ, Jesus Christ, on the cross, reconciled us to God. So we can have this wholeness, this completeness of heart, even in the middle of difficulties. Nobody said that there's no reason to fear. What God said was that the peace that he offered us through Jesus Christ is greater than our fears. And that, in fact, you can choose. You actually can choose. Did you know that? Did you know that you can choose? The reason why you can choose is because it's already done. You see, he is our peace. And Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, puts it together, puts Gideon and Midian along with the Messiah. And it says salvation is the same way. Chapter 9 of Isaiah, starting on verse 4. You shall break the yoke of the burden of the staff on their shoulders, just like in the battle of Midian. And then he says, his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. You see, it's all together. Read Romans chapter 5, verse 1 when we're done. He is our peace. So I want to say goodbye with a priestly blessing. May God bless you and keep you. May God make his face to shine upon you and give you peace. And you know why? Because he is our peace. Yahweh Shalom.